Hi there, my name is Kim Flaherty. I am the owner of Resonant XD, an experience design agency that uses human centered design to help businesses launch successfully and overcome common business challenges for better outcomes. My focus is on helping businesses create brand experiences that resonate by solving the right problems for customers and delivering experiential value, which leaves them satisfied and coming back for more. In this masterclass, we'll dig into what exactly human centered design is and how it can help you grow your business.
I want to tell you a quick story about this restaurant I recently went to. It was a new restaurant in my neighborhood. I had heard a lot about it, there was lots of hype, and it had been an especially long winter here, so I was ready to get a little fancy and have a night out. Here's what my experience looked like. I booked online, I arrived at the host, they seated me, I viewed the menu, the server took our order. The food and drinks were delivered, and then I paid the bill. Now, some of these moments were great, but there were a few that left a little bit to be desired. First of all, the online booking was easy, the host was great, the ambience was gorgeous, the server fantastic. I paid the bill, which I was indifferent about, but I was seated next to this really big, drafty window, and I ended up having to wear my big puffer coat the whole meal. And the menu was on one of those QR codes. I don't know about you, but I really dislike this. I'm there to relax and unplug, and I hate having to zoom in to see things and having to navigate a poorly designed menu on a PDF. They brought my wine out, and it was in this big, chunky, frosted, stemless wine glass. If you're like me, part of the fun of drinking wine is having that fancy wine glass with the stem and being able to see the wine inside the glass. And then lastly, the food came out with pretty poor presentation, which was kind of a bummer. We're all consumers here, so let's start by thinking from that perspective. I want you to think about a business where you were left disappointed. And what did you do about that? Did you write a bad review? Did you never return? Maybe you told family and friends about your poor experience. Now, on the other hand, think about a business that you were happy with and that you were impressed by. I can think of a few examples right now where I walked away so impressed and satisfied that I actually went home and wrote a good review, which I rarely ever do. I told my neighbors and my family all about it, and I've been back multiple times since then. In this field of human centered design, there's a fundamental concept called the value exchange. Customers will deliver value to companies in terms of their business and their money only if they feel they are getting value in return. Now, this isn't earth shattering. We all understand this. It's business 101. However, a lot of small businesses don't really dig far enough into this concept of value exchange. Consumers aren't just weighing price against what they get in terms of physical product or service. Yes, that's part of it, but it goes beyond that. They consider all sorts of things, like how easy it was to do business with you. Was the experience seamless, or was it full of friction and roadblocks? Were they confused? Did they have to ask a bunch of questions to figure out how to use your service? Ultimately, the question will be asked: do they want to work with you again, or would they prefer to find an alternative provider? The key to unlocking long term value for customers lies in delivering a brand experience that meets expectations and leaves customers satisfied, boosting their loyalty and whether or not they will advocate for your brand, all of which drives your long term revenue. Here's the thing about value: our perceptions or how we interpret the world are what form our judgments. This significantly influences how we assign value to things, whether it's a material possession or business services. Human emotion, not just logic, plays a big part in customer perception, and this is what shapes the value customers assign to your brand and your services. That means sometimes people are willing to pay a premium for services that achieve the same goals as others, but do so with more ease and foster more positive emotions. Let's dig deeper into what cognitive and behavioral science tells us about how customers assess value. There are four dimensions by which value is assessed. First, there's the functional value, which is a matter of how effectively the product or service fulfills their needs. And then, of course, there's economic value. They evaluate the economic value by weighing the benefits against the financial costs. But it goes beyond this. Economic value is influenced by other types of value, one of them being experiential value, which is based on their emotional and psychological experiences when interacting with a business. And lastly, we have symbolic value, which is derived from the meaning or the identity that people receive from their choices to work with certain brands. A great example of this is high-end luxury handbags. The reason that people buy these is because of those designer labels. It gives them that symbolic value. So your brand legacy influences this quite a lot. For businesses, this means we need to understand how customers perceive the value of our services and how well our business does or doesn't deliver value across all four of these dimensions. At Resonant XD, I'm focused on both functional and experiential factors of value. For functional, it's about determining whether you are solving the right problems for customers. And are your services actually delivering the utility they're looking for? Not only that, but in terms of experiential value, I examine whether the service is delivered well. I'm looking to see if it's low effort, is it transparent, is it intuitive and enjoyable? This influences people's emotional perceptions that influence their value assessment. Let's look at what this means for business. So, this data here illustrates the impact of customer experience on business outcomes. This graph is from a large-scale survey done with real customers after interacting with real brands across industries and countries. Here we see a positive correlation between the customer satisfaction given to these companies, that's on that horizontal axis, and how it is directly correlated to their perception of trust in the brand. So, in essence, higher satisfaction translates to higher trust. And that's a big one because we know that trust influences whether customers will continue to do business with us and whether they'll advocate for our brand. Speaking of advocacy, the same analysis was done for brand advocacy. The more satisfied a customer is, the more likely they are to recommend you to a friend. And the same holds true for customers' likelihood to purchase from you again. The more satisfied they are, the more likely they are to purchase from you again. So you can see how all of these are really interconnected and reinforcing of each other. All of this demonstrates one fundamental truth. Positive emotions enhance perceived value, while negative emotions diminish it. Let's see how this impacts actual business outcomes. So, this is from a different study that compared the revenue of businesses based on how well they satisfy customers. Companies rated as customer experience leaders, you'll see that in the black line, saw 2 times greater business growth over a 5-year period compared to their counterparts that were rated as customer experience laggards. So, this is just one data point, but I see a lot of these big picture trends that tell the same story for various performance metrics across regions and across industries. Let's imagine that I had actually scored that restaurant across these value dimensions on a 10-point scale. I had already predetermined my functional and economic value assessment because I knew what kind of food they offered and what the prices were in advance. I also had some sense of the symbolic value, but part of that came with actually going to the restaurant and deciding whether I got that sense of identity I was looking for. And lastly, my experiential value rating was, of course, determined by actually visiting, and it didn't really score that well. I didn't get that feeling of sophistication that I was looking for. So I can go ahead and cross out these two goals as not being met. I was wearing my big, uncomfortable coat the whole time, looking at my phone to read the menu, and I didn't feel very sophisticated either. And my predetermined functional and economic value assessments were actually impacted. They were lowered because of that poor experiential factor. So I'm not going to be going back. I have not been an advocate for this restaurant. I told my family and my neighbors that it wasn't really that great of an experience. And if I had to add these scores up, it would only get a 19.5 out of 40. Now, I'm explicitly analyzing this. Most people are not doing this explicitly, but they are doing this. People may not even realize they're thinking about these things. It's really often subconscious and in their minds. So, as we've established, these value perceptions impact customers' future behaviors. So, in terms of business strategy, I want to maximize this value proposition as much as possible. Because for businesses, we want our customers to return. Getting a sale is good, but reconverting that sale over and over again is better than losing that sale ever. If we don't serve people well and maximize that value proposition, this leads to lack of trust, poor loyalty, negative reviews, poor word of mouth advocacy, and all of these compounding together have a negative impact on our business, which causes stagnation and lack of growth. It's a lot like having a leaky bucket, where you'll have to continue spending more and more on marketing, trying to replace those customers you've already converted but who have never returned. So we want to reverse this equation, and the way to do that is by strategically optimizing the experiential value proposition through proactive human-centered design. Human-centered design is a creative problem-solving approach. It's grounded in understanding your customer's needs and goals and evaluating how exactly that experience is delivering perceived value and how well it influences people's value assessments so that we can optimize the value proposition across all 4 of these dimensions. Let me give you a deeper look at this process. We always start with a problem, whether it's declining sales, customer churn or poor loyalty, negative reviews, negative brand perception, even things like the amount you're spending on serving your customers. We start with these problems and then we examine them from a human-centered design approach, which combines 3 core tenets to find the underlying issues that cause dissatisfaction and poor perceptions, all of which hamper our business success. First, we look at the business like a system. How does it function? What are the moving parts and processes that deliver the experience and the value to customers? Things like your employees, your computer systems, your physical space. And we look at processes as well to figure out how well the system is operating in the larger context. We also look deeply into your customers, understanding their needs and goals and how the system, that business system, is delivering on these. Then we use these insights to identify problems and design solutions to increase perceived value and optimize the general performance of the business. We form high-level strategies based on these insights, and we also implement tactical customer-focused solutions. All of this for the purpose of improving performance in the form of increased revenue and decreased operational costs. Too many companies are just rolling the dice in terms of their experience design and their value proposition. But it should not just be about luck, it should be based on strategy. Human-centered design offers that strategy through intentional research and optimization. So this is how you truly differentiate yourself in the market. Now, let's take a step back and think about how modern businesses operate and where we find the opportunities for improvement. In today's world, most businesses have an ecosystem of interaction channels where customers can engage with you and your services. So that might be your website, your physical space if you have one, a mobile app, a customer support line. You're probably also communicating with them over email, social media, and text messaging. This holds true whether you're a restaurant, a retailer, or an online subscription service. So think about your business. Do you have a similar ecosystem of various ways in which your customers engage with you? We can use human-centered design to focus on any one of these experiences, like the app or the website, for example, and improve the design and performance of those. But it's better to look at how this entire ecosystem works for your customers. Because the reality is that customers are traversing across all of these channels over time to achieve their goals with your business. So even if one of these various channels are designed well in isolation, what's even more critical is how they connect together to deliver your services. This is what we call a customer journey. When customers interact across the channels that you offer and across their own devices, both online and in person, to complete their activities. Customers don't think of these as independent experiences the way we do from an internal perspective. They just want to complete their tasks. So the overarching experience they have across this ecosystem over time is really impactful in their minds. With this reality of modern business and customers traversing this multi-channel ecosystem, we see more risk for problems and friction to occur. Even if these individual experiences work well on their own, the connected journey across them is often never explicitly evaluated or designed. So we see things like inconsistent messaging, points in the journey where they have questions that haven't been directly answered, or confusing interfaces along the way. For some businesses, you have just one chance to demonstrate value and create a loyal customer. So, the restaurant experience is an example. But for a lot of businesses, you have a more prolonged set of engagements. And so you have multiple chances to demonstrate or diminish that value assessment. Think of an online subscription service. If it doesn't meet your needs or it's a pain to use, you're probably going to cancel it. Let's look at how a typical customer acquisition funnel works. So, this is just a basic one. The customer sees an advertisement, they do some research, and then they sign up. These acquisition journeys are important in order to convert and bring on new customers. And yes, people are making a value assessment based on this experience. This is often where businesses focus most of their efforts because new customers means immediate revenue. But it's also critically important to not just focus on customer acquisition. It doesn't matter how great this experience is if the ongoing engagements fall short. Watch how these lines shift and change. The more journeys, the more service interactions I have, my value assessment starts to change with each additional customer journey. If these experiences are cumbersome, confusing, or slow, you may end up with a leaky bucket. You want to ensure that this cumulative experience results in a net positive. So let me ask you this. Do you know if your customers feel like it's worth it to be your customer across these value dimensions? And more specifically, do you know what experiential value you deliver? The answer for a lot of companies is no. But in today's competitive landscape where there are a lot of alternatives, this really matters because it's what sets you apart from your competitors. Now, let's walk through a real case study. I had a client, they were a mid-size appliance retailer. They had an e-commerce website where they sold products, but they also had a network of physical stores within a region, and they were starting to see some declining profitability. This company had a legacy brand and they had been around for a while, and they were starting to notice that they were losing sales to newer, more innovative brands. So I started this engagement with some initial discovery, just to understand the business as a system. How is it working? What is working and what's not? Then I did staff interviews to get various perspectives from people who worked in the business. I looked at their performance benchmarks like their sales, their average time with customers, how many people were coming in the door, how many sales were converting. So, with this initial discovery, I formed some research questions. And I could focus in on those in my deeper research with their actual customers, which was my next step. I used a combination of research methods to gather insights about the shopping experience from that initial interaction through the purchase and all the way through the post sale support. I observed customers in the store as they were going through the experience. I also interviewed people after they made a purchase to get feedback and dig deeper into their perceptions and their mindsets. Lastly, I looked for reinforcing themes, other data sources like online reviews and existing survey data that the company had. Through all of this, I identified some problems and I learned how these problems influenced customer perceptions and future behavior. Now, let me show you some of what I learned in the strategy for improvement. From the customer research, I had some general findings and themes. First of all, customers said that they felt salespeople seemed disorganized, and some felt that the sales folks were not as knowledgeable as they should be. They reported feeling uncertain and uninformed throughout the process. Several customers also complained about receiving irrelevant communications. For example, after they bought a product, then they would get a marketing email about that product. And lastly, and this was a big one, they felt their time was not being respected. In looking at their benchmarks, we calculated that the average sales interaction took 20 to 25 minutes. This inefficiency led to lost revenue opportunities and it impacted the overall business performance. I also took a good hard look at the experience with an expert design audit. I went through the purchase journey on my own as if I were a new customer, and I observed where the experience wasn't following best practices. Here are just a few things I found. One big problem was that the sales application their staff was using was outdated. It was slow and it just did not give the salespeople access to the information they needed. So they didn't have the right product information or stock information, which meant they were running around checking information on backroom computers and waiting for stock checks from the warehouse workers. All of this resulted in those long interactions that the customers were complaining about. Customers also reported that following their purchase, the scheduling interface for installation was not intuitive, and it led to a bunch of scheduling errors. After all this data gathering, I analyzed these collective insights by triangulating findings, drawing parallels, and forming conclusions about the root causes for the customer dissatisfaction. Then we were able to create a strategy for improvement. So we made a prioritized list of improvements to eliminate friction points and streamline their processes. One major improvement was a redesigned sales platform, and we made sure that it was tailored to the real-life scenarios that staff were encountering on the sales floor. We enabled quick product lookups, we improved the stock availability information, and we also enabled it to generate product comparisons that they could show to customers right there on the sales floor for a visual comparison, something like you might see online. And then we allowed them to send personalized summaries of all the products these customers were interested in so that they could review it at home and, yes, convert and purchase them online. We also looked at their sales processes to identify the bottlenecks and create solutions to streamline those processes. We improved their ability to track their customer interactions, which then enabled for more relevant and personalized ongoing interactions and communications. And lastly, we made some improvements to their customer-facing systems to increase transparency after an order was made. So customers felt more informed while waiting for delivery and installation. The business saw measurable gains in conversion rates, and they saw increased revenue across all store locations. The new application significantly improved staff efficiency, and it reduced the time it took to serve each customer, which meant more productivity and more sales. Interestingly, the sales team also said that they were more confident. They were now equipped with the things that they needed to do a good job for their customers, which naturally improved these sales interactions overall. Our efforts also decreased the time to serve, which directly influenced that perception that customers felt their time wasn't being respected. We also saw a notable decrease in poor customer reviews on those third-party review platforms. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, we also saw that they were experiencing less employee churn. Previously, they had dealt with a lot of turnover in their sales staff, but now, with salespeople feeling more productive and more empowered, they were losing fewer staff. And that meant that they were spending less time and money recruiting and training new people. This just shows how sometimes we need to pause, evaluate, and reset. I always use this metaphor. Think about your kitchen. Over time, it starts to get cluttered and dysfunctional. If you stop and pull everything out of the cabinets and rearrange and put things where they are easy to access and where you need them based on your cooking workflow, you can be more productive and you can actually enjoy the process of preparing meals in your kitchen. So this case study demonstrates the really strong business case for human-centered design. Shifting your perspective to a customer-focused view enables you to serve people better and just improve the value proposition you offer. This kind of reset on your business operations and experience delivery can totally flip that equation we saw earlier and result in positive business outcomes over the long term. Here's the thing. Large companies employ these kinds of strategies every day. They have entire teams of researchers and designers whose job it is to optimize business through human-centered strategies. As a consultant, I've worked with all of these brands you see on the screen, applying these exact strategies to boost their business performance. But it doesn't have to be something employed just by big business. I want to make these strategies accessible to all businesses. In fact, you can often see bigger impact in small and moderate-sized businesses because there's just less bureaucracy and red tape to navigate. So you can actually get things done and see positive impact sooner. So it's time to look at your value proposition from the outside in and deliver experiences that keep your customers coming back for more. Book a free call with me to discuss how I can help you take your business to the next level.